Hey folks, today we are going to be talking about a little bit different than boring investments, but today is all about spending money. A lot of you guys pinch pennies and then you find some better ways to save money and invest, but you haven't yet learned the cool ways to spend the money and in particular travel. And why travel? We had Bill Perkins on the call a couple years ago, and one of the takeaways, at least for myself, is life is about accumulating money to a certain point, but trading that money for experiences, more than likely once you've hit the age of 40 for most people. And this is where luxury travel and creating experiences comes into play. So I brought a guest. He's actually somebody in our community, so he's not just a random fellow out there, David. And because we also want to support a lot of our investors, our business owners. So I brought him on so we can talk about better travel experiences as he does this for a living for his clients. A lot of this for recovering cheapos like myself. We didn't know that this stuff was possible or even out there. But I guess, David, maybe real high level, what do you do for clients out here?
So we curate and design bespoke luxury trips for people, families, retirees, multi-gen families, and the types of trips that we put together are truly luxury five-star trips. For the most part, they can be very customized. So we do everything from a vacation, which can be just like a family spring break trip, to some really elaborate adventure expeditions and yacht charters and villas, and really anything is possible. And I think that's where it starts to get fun. And that's also when a travel professional becomes really essential, because people think of travel agent as someone like, I don't know, like spinning an old phone and just like sitting in an office somewhere, like really old school, where they're just booking stuff for you. And the idea of a travel agent has evolved so much, and there's so much customization that you can do in any destination. You can privatize major attractions. You can take early, like before a museum opens, you could have it all to yourself. You can have insane degrees of privacy and luxury and service. And even if you don't want to crank it up that far, you can still benefit greatly from having a professional design your trip, because you can have so much seamlessness in the experience. So that's what I do for people with my team, is we create the experience and try and make it airtight.
So maybe let's break down like the normal, I call it the commodity travel experience that you have those normal travel agents do. Like, how do they monetize? Maybe just break that down for
Yeah,
folks.
it's a commission-based business essentially. So at its simplest form, when you book a hotel through a travel advisor, you're going to pay the same amount that you would pay on your own, or a little bit less with the travel advisor in some cases, but not more. And essentially, the hotels pay travel advisors a small commission on what you book. That's essentially how it works. And
So it doesn't come from the client. Like you, the traveler, don't really have to spend for this.
and there are some very baseline perks that honestly any travel advisor could get you: a small $100 credit at a hotel, a room upgrade if it's available. These are things that most travel advisors should be able to provide you, that are nice to have things, and almost like you feel them more if you don't have them. But that's really just a baseline. When you start to use a travel advisor for a lot of fine tuning and special requests and kind of hard to get stuff, or things that you might not even know exist, that's when the real value shows itself. But there's still a value even.
Recap, it doesn't really make it's a no-brainer even on the low end, perhaps use one, but I guess where I'm it's just like friction. It just takes time to wait for some. I'd rather just book the damn thing myself. I don't know why AI uses these use cases on, oh, book your travel, find the best flight. It's easy enough just to do it yourself, right? I don't know, but
Yeah, I would beg to differ, because There are so many nuts and bolts in a trip. If you are just booking a hotel the night before you board a cruise, okay, then how exactly are you going to get from the hotel to the boat? Okay, you need a transfer there. And what happens if that driver doesn't show up and suddenly you're rushing to get to the boat? So it's like all of those little transition points can become real friction. It might seem like it's friction to have to deal with someone else, but when you're stuck, when there's something that should be simple and it breaks down and then has a ripple effect, that could ruin your whole trip. One digit, if the name on your visa doesn't match exactly what's on your passport, you could be denied access to the flight and your whole trip could crumble. There are lots of things that can go wrong, of course, and that's when having someone with a microscope going through it and doing it all for you can definitely save you a lot of pain.
People like that too.
But when it becomes luxury, it becomes too risky for how much you're spending to try and assume that responsibility yourself. Too much can go wrong too easily that it's not recommended at all.
Let's maybe define some of this a little bit because I started to travel maybe a little bit nicer. Like, for example, a lot of things I'll do is for convenience, time save, especially with kids these days. Like when we go to Japan, we don't do subway. I'm just going to Uber everywhere. I would have never done that 10 years ago. But I guess maybe from a cost breakdown, and I need rules of thumb from net worth from your clients, what you've seen from them, or like how much do they spend on each trip? Because I hear from a lot of people in our group, a vacation for a family of four could be 10, 20 grand easily right there.
A five-star vacation would be 20 grand, say a week-long trip for a family of four. Obviously, it depends on time of year and destination, but I would say that's the lower threshold for a five-star trip. Now, of course, you don't have to go five-star, but a simple way to think about the cost of it is, okay, a five-star hotel is around $1,000 a night to start. And family of four, you need two rooms, and then you want to add some tours and transportation, and that can add up to around the same amount that all of the accommodations is. That can add up pretty quickly, and then there's really no upper limit. It's hard to just say this is how much a luxury trip costs, because if you're going to the Amalfi Coast in July, or if you're chartering a yacht in the Caribbean over festive, those are just, it's like the Wild West in terms of how much things cost. And on the flip side, you could go to a less touristy destination, like maybe something in Central America. I was in Guatemala and they have nice boutique hotels there. You could have that same 30K is going to get you, you can add in a helicopter flight and just all sorts of stuff depending on the destination. But there is a baseline for just the five-star hotels, and the hotels rates across the world have gotten really steep. And I think what I've noticed is some of the rates in Europe, there's this almost a sixth star on the five-star rating scale, where there are some hotels in Paris and London that are ultra luxe. And of course, you don't have to stay in those hotels, but my point is just that this four-star, five-star paradigm can be hazy because you could have a boutique five-star place in a less touristy destination that's lovely, or you could have one of these palatial, historic ones, and the rates are going to be vastly different. But that's just a rough idea. And of course, when you start adding private tours and drivers on at disposal, those things are incredible to have and make everything really seamless, but of course, boost the cost too.
We're first generation multi. We're not spending 10 grand to stay at the Beverly Hills Hotel for the brand.
Yeah.
I think we're looking more for that value, the 5.5-star experience for the 4-star, 5-star price that nobody really knows about. So I guess with that in mind, maybe take us through some of the low-hanging fruit on things little accents that you would add on to somebody's trip that maybe people just weren't aware of that was a thing.
Yeah, that's not just a throwaway example. It's actually the first thing that if you're used to doing stuff yourself, having someone at the airport with a sign with your name on it is just immediately you're not waiting in a taxi line or you're not even waiting for an Uber. And even if you could call an Uber, but just having a nice car waiting for you, that's one example of if you just took all of the linking pieces of a trip and had a driver there for you already, that's a nice, it feels good.
What does that cost? Because if you're going from a moderate trip to the hotel, that's usually about $50, $100 at least. But like,
Totally. I'm thinking of Rome or Florence. I mean, London's going to be more, but you feel that like it's having an S class pick you up and take you in. It's just like, it's not that much relative to the rest of the trip or the feeling you get of, oh, I'm taken care of. Now, I'll give you a different example that has to do with transportation. I had a client who went skiing in Japan and he needed to get from Hakuba back to Narita Airport. So he got on the train, he got off the train and had to transfer trains in Tokyo Station. I got him someone waiting for him at the station, the driver, like a meet and greet service, but at the train station, someone waiting directly outside of the car of the train that he was on. He has all these ski gear with him. It's like pretty hectic when you're just chilling on a train for 3 hours and then you get off in Tokyo and it's, oh God, I got to find my driver. I'm going to the airport. So to have someone there saying, let me take your bag, just follow me right there, like that adds a lot of value. Like that's a point where you could be really stressed out and you don't have to be. And it's not to say that you have to have that kind of service to avoid the stress, but that's the guaranteed way to just zap it. So I do think about those transitions quite a bit.
that's where like someone in your industry knowing the contractors, because I tried to do this going from like Vancouver to Seattle, and there's all these like random contractors, and here they are driving you, right?
We have our preferred partners on the ground in every destination, and I travel to trade shows and conferences just to meet those people. And then I have their number. I'm WhatsApping everybody, just like so many contingencies. So it's just like you're protected in so many ways. One last example for my personal travels is I love Greece. My wife and I go to Greece a lot. And the ferries in Greece it's an experience. If you've done it once, but it's the fuel, the lines, the heat, it's the crowds. And there's something really kind of, it's enjoyable, but not when you've done it a lot. So we hired a boat, not even like a yacht or anything, just like a fast, rigid, inflatable boat to take us between two islands that were actually pretty close together, but by ferry would have been really cumbersome to get between. And we just blasted there privately in 45 minutes. And it was like, probably like 700 euros or something. And it was like, that was it was an experience in itself. We're like on this private boat, we're blasting across the Aegean, we're laughing. It was just a memory in itself. Plus, it saved us like half a day of our vacation. So things like that add a lot of value.
Okay, so travel, I'm big on that, like removing the friction, saving time. So the next one is like air travel and hotel, right? Those are the big ones. And then
Yeah.
restaurants, kind of how you break it down.
The air is always like a separate thing just because unless someone's flying private, which most people aren't, we're dealing with the airlines and we have to like play by their rules. So air is one thing. And then accommodation is another, whether it's hotels or private exclusive use properties. And then I think of it as tours and transportation is the last bucket. Or if you want, you could separate tours and transportation, but that's essentially how we think of it.
So we kind of define these different categories here. Let me ask you the question that people want to hear is like, when is the luxury option not worth it? If you were to kind of pick one of these, and then obviously which one would be the follow up?
I don't think the true 5 star, like 2,500 a night hotel rooms are worth it in a lot of cases, or even 1,000. So I think with accommodation, you have to be, that's where you want to be careful. And I'm not saying don't book hotels that are like, don't book 5 star hotels. That's all I'm doing out here. But I do think that's another moment when you have to know what hotel to book. You have to know what room category at that hotel to book. They should have what you want in the room waiting for you so that you're actually getting the value of it. Otherwise, there are a lot of times when the rate just doesn't match up with the experience you're getting. And nowadays, it's even more complicated and confusing for the customer because you have big hotel chains like Marriott now has multiple edition hotels and Bulgari hotels are all under the Marriott umbrella. But sometimes I go into these hotels that you would think based on the website and the sort of first impression, like, ooh, this is going to be really fancy. And then you go in and it might just feel like another Marriott, for example. Bulgari hotels, by the way, do not fit that description, but just hotels is my simple answer to your question. There's a lot of variance there, even within a certain price point.
Yeah,
So
so I guess maybe are you more of a fan of the big 4 or 5 hotels? I don't know if I know these some of these guys are your friends. You gotta be careful what you say.
yeah, I
Like
won't
the
name
Four
names.
Seasons, the Ritz, but those big brands, the Park Hyatts, the brands that
Yeah,
everybody knows, versus the non-brand boutique. Which one is?
I love the boutique hotels. I think boutique family owned hotels or independent hotels, when I'm traveling, that's what I want. And there are trade offs. Operationally, some of the bigger brands are just, there's a reason people love Four Seasons because everything, the service is just impeccable. But there's a certain character that you get at these kind of one off, very lovingly designed family type establishments that I think have more sense of place. And there can also be really good value because they're lesser known. They might be just smaller overall or not have the same amenities. You might not have a state of the art gym or, but they're still going to be like, a great spa a lot of the times, or the food is often way better at those places. Some like I care a lot about food and not just fine dining, but quality ingredients. And so I've been honing in on some hotels that are like growing their own food on site and controlling more of the levers in the guest experience. And the result is really, you just feel like you're staying in someone's home, but it feels like a 5 star hotel still. So I think boutique hotels definitely a lot of upside. But again, some of them, if you don't know what you're doing, can be rustic or you can be unpleasantly surprised. So that's another area where you might need some guidance.
I guess how does a guy like you? Maybe this is the secret sauce, but like, how do you determine a certain like more boutique hotel is better or not? Obviously, you stay there, you possibly stay there, but if you don't, is
Yeah.
it more so through colleagues in the industry or a conference that you meet other people? Like, how do you get your intel unless you actually stay there? I know that's a big part of what you do, but like,
Yeah.
what is your inputs? Because people always
Yeah.
ask
Yeah.
like an investor point of view, what are you all looking at? It's like,
Well, I have my circles similar to you. I have other advisors who are in the same consortium that I'm in, or that I just have a smaller ring of advisors who are doing it at the same high level that I am. One thing that's really nice about the travel industry is that there's so much demand for travel that it's not it's not that competitive among travel advisors because there's so much to go around that it's a fun industry to work in for that reason. So we call them fam trips. and they're like educational trips for travel advisors to gain firsthand experience so they know what they're actually talking about. And then on those trips, not only do I learn about the properties, but I meet other advisors. And then if there's a place that I haven't been, I can ask them. And then on top of that, I'm going to very niche focused thematic and regional trade shows and learning about new hotel openings. There's a lot of different levers. And obviously, first and foremost, I try and travel as much as I can to get the intel myself, but I can't be everywhere.
And you got to work. You can't just go on
Yeah,
vacation.
I have learned how to work in just about any time zone on any aircraft, and that's just part of it now. But it's not always the vacation that it looks like when people see me out there. I'm always thinking about how I can apply this to an existing client or a potential future one.
If you were trying to vet out yourself or another travel agent,
Uh,
which I would think you would just do your own stuff, but
yeah.
would you be more looking for a guy that is they're really good at a certain area that you want to go to? That's their expertise, like the Europes, the Asias, or is it more that you get me, right? You get me and my family, right? Is it more that rapport? Which one would you be looking prioritize more?
The latter, because there are a lot of destination specialists, and we send clients to all seven continents. And even though I might have more experience with certain countries or regions, I don't even advertise myself as a Europe specialist or a safari person, even though I design all of those trips. What I think should matter most to the customer is that rapport for sure, because this is a pretty personal work. I really get to know my clients well. We're talking like exactly what are your preferences here. I'm like, I want to know what kind of sleeper you are. I want to know your favorite grape varietals. I want to know about your kids and what their energy level is and what their hobbies are. And so over time, when we've done a couple trips a year for a client over multiple years, then I really get to know these people and vice versa. So it has to be a relationship that you got to like talking to the person and you have to trust them. And that's something that AI can't necessarily lead you to. It tends to be word of mouth as a result. My business just comes from word of mouth primarily because it's something you have to feel. But I would definitely say that feeling and that rapport that you have is the most important thing, because like you need someone who's going to really fight for you if something goes wrong, or even when everything's going perfect, you want someone who's anticipating what you're going to want.
Yeah. I still see it as a little bit different than like a real estate agent. They're all going to get upset with me now, and the mortgage lenders, right? The mortgage lender, they all go to this same computer screen and they look at what is the rates and the fee structure on these loans today. And it's all the same. They all go through this portal, and you could make the same argument for real estate agents. Sure, there's a little bit more negotiation behind the scenes on that, but there's no like portal that y'all go through. Is there? I know you're texting your inner circle. Hey, this guy wants to go to Portugal, and so you have those contacts, of course. But there's no like central portal for this on your guys' side. Is there?
No, I think that analogy does somewhat stand up. We're all doing the same thing, more or less. I think the difference is the level of service that we're doing it at. And the service comes from the communication. How easy is this person to access? How quickly do they respond? Do you really have their attention, especially when you need it? And those are things that are hard to tell maybe right away until you've worked with someone for a little bit. But when you have it, you feel it and it clicks. And then ideally for both sides, it would be, why would I work with anyone else? Feels right.
So going back to the question, when is luxury not worth it?
There are places in the world that are just, they have a certain like cachet. People will continue demanding certain destinations no matter what, no matter how mobbed they get, no matter how overrun they get. And I think to whatever degree travelers can resist the temptation of some of those places, they will receive better value overall. Simply put, the really popular tourist hotspots, if you insist on them and you just must check off the box of a destination, that's gonna burn you value wise. And that's probably true whether it's luxury or not, but it's definitely true for luxury. Now, the flip side of that is there are exceptions to that too. If you want a really popular place, but you want to avoid the tourist, like the boom of it, and have some solace in a place that is normally mobbed, you can have that if you pay for it. But I think it is in general a trap to chase destinations that are buzzworthy. And most of the time, just by choosing a destination that is slightly less known, if you went to Ischia instead of Amalfi Coast, they're near each other, they're similar, but right there, that's a difference. And then if you wanted to go even more off the beaten, you could have crazy value if you went to a destination that feels really remote, but you wanted to live like a king. If it feels obvious and you're just doing it because it's a thing you've seen on Instagram, then you're probably getting gouged in some way. I hate to say it.
Yeah, that's maybe you can give us some examples of conversations you've had in the pre-travel phase and uncovering what people really want. But yeah, I was in a
Okay.
small roundtable with the mayor here in Hawaii, and he alluded to that Hawaii is struggling in this respect in the what do we call it, the Instagram type of
Hmm.
traveler phase where people want that moment, that square image, and obviously they just want to show it off to their stupid friends, whatever. But he's people don't come back to Hawaii again and again. There's not that loyal traveler. Plus, the Japanese tourists aren't coming to Hawaii too. But you got all these people coming to Hawaii. They want to hit up all the same spots that they've seen, and they're like, check the box, been there, done that. Let me move on with my life. Let me go into the next thing. So I know this is a long term trend, but it's currently now out there. But yeah,
Yeah.
just call it out for what it is.
It's sad, and I get it because I have the same urge. I think ultimately it's a FOMO thing. It's like you want to prove to people, like you're finally there and you want to prove that, look, I'm really doing it. But it is sad because, especially when you're paying a lot for something, like you want to experience it vividly and fully and and like that nonstop desire to document everything like that is like really can take you out of it and sabotage you. But the going back to the pre-trip conversations, I'm glad you brought that up because that's so crucial to what we do. I often have clients who come to me and they know exactly what they want. And it might be somewhere that is not one of those Instagram hotspots. And they're just like, yep, I want this. And maybe they've already done research or they've had a friend who went there. And I'm like, okay, great. But often I get clients who don't know what they want, and it requires rounds of conversations up front to really get to the bottom of what are your goals for this trip? Because I doubt it's just to check a box. Maybe it is for a world wonder because they have that appeal of, yeah, I want to see Machu Picchu or I want to stand on the Great Wall of China. But most of the time, there's like some deeper connection that they want to have with the people that they're with. They're celebrating something. They want to show their kids some new way of living or like just expand their kids or their own minds. There's more to it. I have this corporate client who she was really burned out and she was having a 50th birthday and she was like, I've been doing this corporate thing. I've achieved crazy success, but I'm like tired. I'm like exhausted of this. And like, I want to have fun again. I want to feel like a kid again. And she actually lived in Bermuda. And I say that because she wanted something that was totally opposite of like her everyday reality. So we had these discussions, and she ended up going to Finland, Lapland, and had this winter experience with all of her best friends. And they just did the like craziest, funnest stuff you could imagine. They like floated in the ice in those like big suits, and they were like like dog sledding and just like saunas, everything you can imagine. And if it were not for those conversations up front and that kind of candor, then I wouldn't have gotten that. Sometimes it's, no, let's take a step back and really think about, how do I want to feel when I'm on this trip that I'm finally taking? And when clients do that in advance, not only do I love it because that's like, I really get to know them, but it pays off when they're on the trip in the form of these memories that are like truly one of a kind, lifetime memories.
Yeah, and part of that memory creation, sometimes there needs to be an element of danger a little bit or uncertainty. Like, how I know you and I had this conversation, right? But
Yeah.
how often does that come up when that's actually asked for? Or, hey, do you mind if kind of we go a little bit off the ledge and do something a little bit different? I think you might like it, right? Like,
Yeah, uncertainty, I'm all for. Danger, I've conditioned myself like I don't like that as much.
no helicopters. I don't like
Yeah, no,
helicopters.
but I'm just saying like I have to think like for myself, I always used to think like how can I make this more epic? And then I started thinking for clients, and I have the same thought, let's make this epic for whatever that means for them, but I have to temper it with, okay, no one can get hurt on this. So that's why like when you say danger, I'm like, whoa, not danger, but uncertainty for sure, like novelty for sure. Like, I'll give you another example. I have clients going to Iceland in August for the solar eclipse on August 12th. That's going to be a big deal for anyone who has the chance to see it. And they are going to get a helicopter as like which is inherently dangerous to some degree, but it's like a contingency plan for the weather. Just in case the weather is bad, you plan this whole trip to go to Iceland. If you can't see the solar eclipse, that would be a huge bummer. So they're like, okay, I'll get the chopper so that I can go wherever the visibility is clearest. And then after that 1 day or 1 minute is taken care of, then there's like a volcano crater that you can only in Iceland, they invent this kind of thing. You can take this contraption that descends into a dormant volcano crater. And it's like, I wouldn't call that dangerous because it's like controlled, but it is outrageous. It's not an everyday experience at all. You are going to remember that for a long time. And that's the kind of stuff that I am all about. There are so many versions of that at various degrees of thrill. It doesn't have to be extreme adventure to be a new memory. If you want it to be, it can. If you want to like deal with volcanoes and go really off the grid and go see tree climbing gorillas in the Republic of Congo, like I got you covered. But it doesn't have to be that to form a memory. It just has to be new. And so part of the preliminary conversations we have is deciding like what is your tolerance for hard adventure versus soft adventure, so to speak.
My buddy just mentioned he did the helicopter thing. You gotta get some lessons for this because you're in avalanche country. It's still relatively safe, but he was like, yeah, that one trip was way better than like 20 times I went to Whistler at that thing.
Yeah.
But I remember, yeah, recently I came back from Thailand. We did the Muay Thai lessons, but they took us to this like real like authentic, not one of these like in a mall type of Muay Thai places, and that was memorable.
Okay, authentic is a word that I hear all the time, and I think about this all the time because there's like everyone wants authentic experiences, of course. But there's something like that you're not saying when you say you want authentic experiences most of the time, which is that you want it to be authentic, but you still want it to be comfortable to a degree. And so I think the game is deciding, okay, how uncomfortable traditionally are you like willing to get for a short period of time in order to have a authentic experience? Because part of what makes travel rewarding is there is some discomfort in like a brand new foreign experience. That's part of what like imprints it in your mind forever. But a lot of times people say, I want an authentic experience, and they want an authentic but plush experience, or like they want it to be authentic but still familiar. And so you have to really decide like how unfamiliar am I willing to go? Not necessarily unsafe, but just like how uncomfortable am I willing to go, trusting that David's going to make sure it's safe, and like these vendors that we're being paired with are competent and expert. And when you decide that and then you hit that point, it's like it's just awesome because you make the memory and nobody gets hurt.
It's basically you try and maximize the thrill while still keeping them comfortable, right? That's the name of the game.
Yeah, and if you want the really extreme stuff, like I had a phase in my life where I did some extreme stuff, and it was like almost like more reckless than anything. And yeah, I had memories from it, but I think if you do want that hard adventure, so to speak, you can absolutely have that. That tends to be pricier to do at an expert, safe level. The same way that like a Arctic or like a mountaineering expedition, like that there's risk involved with that. If you want to do that, you need the best people to do it with. And there's a lot of that same cost benefit with adventure experiences, but you certainly don't have to have like a thrilling, like go skydiving or something like that to make a memory.
It's just creating a bond or creating a memory. I guess how would you do that? The folks that are they got adult kids, this would be that multi-generational family travel, right? Like,
Yeah, I think it's about getting hands on, like using your hands with real crafts, with real artisans in the locations that specialize in that. That is authentic to me. And kids can do that. You can do a pottery workshop in like a village on Crete that has been doing nothing but pottery for centuries. And that's such a like memorable thing. Same thing with anything, with a cooking class. You can go into someone's home or studio. You can get just any local person who has devoted their life to something, just let them show you into their world and let your hobbies and curiosities guide you. You don't have to just go to Japan and see a sumo demonstration and geishas. You can go and see a knife maker in his studio, or like you can take whatever your interests, like whiskey or matcha or whatever it may be, and find the best expression of that from a master and let them teach you. And that's an incredible experience for all ages. I just had clients in Venice last week, and they did the typical Venice stuff. They were on the gondola and like they had their photo op. They did a mask making workshop with a Venetian mask master, and these clients were in their 70s and they looked like kids. They were like sending us photos and they're like holding the masks up, like doing this arts and crafts, using their hands, getting a little dirty. That's the stuff you remember.
yeah. We came back from Thailand. They're all into these inhalers there. It's kind of weird, but we made these like they sat down and had us build our own incense or like
Oh, you
they put
have it
menthol
right
on it.
there.
But that was
Cool.
fun. We were all like grinding it all up. So yeah, that was arts and crafts.
Yeah, and anything that where you get to take something home, and especially if it's something that you can consume at home or use or just enjoy for an extended period of time after you return, those are the best kinds of souvenirs rather than something that just sits on your desk. But because then you are tapping back into that memory every time you experience that thing or use that or smell it.
Yeah. In terms of client profiles, do you work with any of those entrepreneurs that sold their business for 5-10 mil on that exit celebration trip?
I've seen that in a few different expressions, and it's there's different degrees of how much you want to pop champagne and really ball out and celebrate that. But there's lots of different ways that people can celebrate a win or an exit, and I think they should. What it usually looks like is a longer trip, and a lot of the stuff that you may have refrained from, you just say, yeah, this time I want it to be I want it to be airtight. I want the best. I want exactly what I want. If I am like I had a person rent a villa in Italy, and they're fitness people, and they didn't want to compromise on their fitness thing. There's a different mentality when it's like, no, I got this exit, or this is my time, this is my trip. I'm gonna go on a safari for a month, and I want to stay at the best lodges I can in the best places at the best time of year. That's another thing. It's just like you go a little bit bigger. It's almost, instead of just doing this little like a mid-size trips, making the most with what you can in a couple weeks or 9 days or 7 days that you may have available. It's more like, no, this one I want to bring my friends with me, or this one I want to bring my whoever. It just becomes more about sharing it with other people and making it more epic too. And that's when it gets really fun.
And I guess for the opposite end of the spectrum, right? The high income professional may have some teenage kids in there too,
Yep.
but they don't have very much time, right? They're in and out
Totally.
less than 5 days. Like,
Yeah.
what are some things that you've kind of done to tweak it more for that? I guess you call it the firecracker vacation, right?
You have to not try and do too much. You have to just prioritize what matters to you. So you can still go international with kids if your kids are old enough. I'll let you decide what that is. But you can still go to Seattle to Asia. You could have that experience, a city escape, and do a lot of the experiences I was just describing. You can have a crazy fun experience in a compact duration. I just wanted to take your kids to London for 5 days. That would be so great. If you can add a second stop, if you have enough time, great. You just make the most of the time you have. And I feel like generally, if it's a shorter trip, cities tend to be better because there's just more to see and do, and less like getting between two destinations. What you want to avoid is flying across the world and then you switch hotels and it takes you a whole day to get to the second hotel, and suddenly you've had 12 hours at each location and then you need to go home. And honestly, most of our trips, or a lot of our trips, are that way. We work with a lot of families, and they are just trying to take advantage of these pockets, these school breaks, and you got to book those things early. That's another thing, because you and every other family wants the same two-bedroom unit at Whistler over President's Day weekend.
You only have X amount of summers or spring breaks or fall breaks with those guys. And maybe in similar ideal, the folks who are retirees or near retirees, at some point you can't do a lot of stuff. What are some things that when you've talked with clients, you're kind of like, ooh, you're a little too old for that, right? That's one of the takeaways I had from the Bill Perkins book was like, you live life in 5-year increments. Certain things I don't know, maybe this might not be true, but you and I probably will not go to Coachella. That's probably not There was a time in our life where
I
that was a
did
thing.
once and I was too late. I felt it. I was like, I shouldn't even be here. I'm too old for
Yeah.
this. But yeah, there are certain things that, yeah, I think the biggest one is just based on your physical limitations. And I hope everyone can go a long time being physically active and mobile and healthy. But the fact is, people see my parents, for example, are like in this phase right now trying to travel everywhere they can, knowing there's not that much left in terms of their really active years. And I think,
Something can be said for living life like that, too, right?
yeah, you just have to you have to pick and choose. I sent some clients who were pushing 80 to Peru and they had an awesome time. And I warn people if there's potential challenges. Of course, I want to manage expectations. But despite my best efforts to do that, they still struggled a lot with the elevation in Peru, particularly in Lake Titicaca. But that's an example where you could have a beautiful hotel, luxury train, and all the stuff that you would want on a luxury trip to Peru. But if you have potential limitations or ailments, go to those destinations now. And usually, I wouldn't wait too long if you want to go to Africa. Just, I don't want to make it about the destination necessarily, but if it's a more active dream that you have, definitely don't wait for that because that really saddens me a lot when I hear it a lot where people are like, yeah, I waited and then now I can't, my knees are bummed out and I can't even do that. But the idea that you can just wait until some dream time, certainly some times are better than others in terms of health and just the flow of your life and how your kids or your finances. But generally, this idea of I'm going to wait until the circumstances are perfect, that's a very dangerous way to live. You will probably miss out on something you really wanted to do if you roll that way.
Well, let's wrap up here. Anything you think that folks might have missed?
I guess the last thing I'll say is think about travel not just as your next trip, but the same way you would think about investing in a way of you're like building for the long term and progressing and growing towards goals that you may have for like how you want to be, how you want to live and move and the freedom you want to have. And so some people just think about taking one trip and of course you got to just take the one, but I think about I'm helping people invest their leisure time, how you want to spend the everything you've earned and saved and worked towards. Now you want to invest the time and the that leisure time. That's so precious.
How many of these wealthy people, how many trips are they going? How many trips are they? What's their cadence on sitting at home versus out and about that you see from these folks?
Yeah, if they have kids, they do a spring break trip if they can. School gets out, June, they're gone. So the families are different. The young families are different than retired people who is like no rules. It's go time and they're just booking everything and they want longer trips and they want to bring the whole family. So it's different. But I think the one thing that unifies them all and that I help everyone with is trying to build a progression over time so your tolerance to foreignness builds up and that allows you to explore some maybe fringe destinations or take some risks experientially and to think about the next 10 years where do you really want to go, that can be really valuable rather than just thinking about your next trip.
Yeah.
My company is called Beckonaire. Beckonaire is based on the word beckon, like to be called or invited. And I named my company Beckonaire just to tap into that element of mindful travel rather than just going because we're bored. You can check me out on beckonaire.com. That's beckonaire.com. And my email is david@beckonaire.com. So if anyone wants to talk about travel, as you can probably tell, it's my favorite thing to talk about. So reach out with any ideas or curiosities you may have.
And yeah, you didn't get that, you're just driving, just shoot us an email. We can connect you over to David. But yeah, thanks for jumping on, Dave. Pretty appreciate it. I know I'm recovering cheapo, so maybe one of these days you'll get me to spend more money. But
You're doing just fine. We will advise each other. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. This was a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
cool. All right, see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.